says human rights, Article 21, right to die with dignity. In a written petition under Article 32, it was prayed that the hospital where she is laying for last 36 years be directed to stop the life support system. The Supreme Court ruled that the individuals had a right to die with dignity, issuing guidelines regarding passive euthanasia. The court ruled that a decision to discontinue life support can be taken either by the parents or the spouse or only the very close relatives or in the absence of any of them, even by a person or a body of persons acting as a next friend or in their absence by the doctors attending the patient subject to approval of High Court. Common cause a registered society versus Union of India 9 March 2018 right to die with dignity. The Apex Court held that the right of life and liberty as envisaged under Article 21 of the Constitution encompasses within its sphere individual dignity and that the person right and that the right to life live with dignity also includes the smoothing of the process of dying in case of a terminally ill patient or a person in PVS with no hope of recovery and that a competent person who has come of age has the right to refuse specific treatment or all treatment or opt for an alternative treatment even if such decision entails the risk of death. Detailed directions issued by the Apex Court in this direction. Human rights. And the next is human rights recognition of a transgender person as a third gender. Gender identity is integral to the dignity of an individual and is the core of personal autonomy and self-determination. And Article 14, 19, and 21 of the Constitution within their sweep include transgender and are not as such limited to male or female gender. Unions before therefore has to be considered as third gender over and above binary genders under our constitution and the laws. The Apex Code directed that the center and the state governments to take steps to treat them socially and educationally backward classes of citizens and extend all kinds of reservation in cases of admission in educational institutes and for public appointments. This is under the Article 14, 19, and 21 of Constitution within their sweep include transgender and are not as such limited to the male or that their within their sweep include transgender and are not as such limited to male or female. Unions therefore have to be considered as gender over and above transgender binary genders. Our law under our constitution and the laws, the Apex Court directed the center and the state governments to take steps to treat them socially and educationally backward classes of citizens, and extend all kind of reservation in case of admission in educational institutions and for public appointments. Human rights right to privacy, a fundamental right under Article 21. This case, known as Aadhaar case, the Supreme Court held that privacy is a constitutionally protected right which emerges primarily from the guarantee of life and personal liberty in Article 21 of the Constitution. Further held that elements of privacy also arise in varying contexts from the other facets of freedom and dignity recognized and guaranteed by the fundamental rights contained in Part 3. Further held that the elements of privacy also arise. So all of these are like human rights, right? To like under Article 21 of fundamental rights, right to privacy, which says that Justice K.S. Puttaswamy was retired, who is retired now, versus Union of India, and which is like right to privacy in this case, popularly known as Aadhaar case. The Supreme Court held that privacy is a constitutionally protected right which emerges primarily from the guarantee of life and personal liberty in Article 21 of the Constitution. Further held that elements of privacy also arise in varying contexts from the other facets of freedom and dignity recognized and guaranteed by the fundamental rights contained in Part 3. Decriminalizing homosexuality. Human rights. Navtej Singh Johar versus Union of India 2018. Then SCC 1 2018. A five-judge Supreme Court bench gave a historic unanimous decision on Section 377 of the Indian Penal Code decriminalizing homosexuality. The Supreme Court ruled out that sexual orientation is an intrinsic element of liberty, dignity, privacy, individual autonomy, and equality, and that intimacy between consenting adults of the same is beyond the legitimate interest of the state. So what I have understood is like there are basic some of the basic factors which define like economy, cultures, and these are some of the basic things just to keep the society united and most good of the most people. These are some of the basic things on the basis of which we decide all of these things, like whether something to happen or not, giving, and then we find pros and cons accordingly. Section 377 was the product of the Victorian era with its attendant moral values. Victorian morality must give way to constitutional morality. The that insofar as Section 377 criminalizes consensual acts of adults. So ultimately, it says that as per Article 377, so it says as per Article 377, there was like, this is a crime to like do in engaging in same-sex activities. So this rule, which is Navtej Singh Johar versus Union of India 2018, this said that this is beyond the legitimate interest of the state. This is in between the consenting adults of the same sex and is beyond the legitimate interest of the state. Section 377 was the product of Victorian era, with its attendant moral values. Victorian morality must give way to constitutional morality. That insofar as Section 377 criminalizes consensual sexual acts of adults in private is violative of that insofar Section 377 criminalizes consensual sexual acts of adults in private. This particular act is violative of Articles 14, 15, 19, and 21 of the Constitution. It is against the Constitution, Articles 14, 15, 19, and 21 of the Constitution. That's why this particular Section 377 has to be abolished. Then comes the epic Shah case 1985 to SCC 556, a milestone in the journey of gender justice. Petition Shah paid for grant of maintenance under section 125 of CRPC. Okay. The Constitution Bench of Apex Court, considering the provision of section 125 of the CRPC, opined that the said provision is truly secular in chart character and is different from the personal law of the parties. The court further held that such provisions are essentially of a prophylactic character and cut across the barriers of religion. Just a second, close the gate. Epic. Some. The court also held that liability imposed by Section 125 to maintain close relatives who are indignant is founded upon the individual's obligation to society to prevent vagrancy and destitution. The court also held that the liability imposed by Section 125 to maintain close relatives who are indignant and indigent is founded upon the individual's obligation to the society to prevent vagrancy and destitution. So what I figured out is like I'm sticking on certain things where I have to do the some meditation anyways, not related to this particular video. Gender justice preventing sexual harassment at workplace, which is Vishakha versus State of Rajasthan 1997. Bhavari Devi, a social worker from Rajasthan, was by 5 men for preventing a child marriage. This is prevention of sexual harassment at workplace, which is Vishakha versus State of Rajasthan. In Bhauri area, social worker for Rajasthan was brutally a member of renting for preventing a child marriage. The trial court acquitted all 5 accused. Vishakha Group of Women's Education and Research took up the case of Honi Devi and filed a petition before the Supreme Court on the issue of sexual harassment at the workplace. So, trial court acquitted all of 5 of them. Then Vishakha, a education reformer, a group. Vishakha is a group for women's education and research. Took up the cause of Bhavani Devi and filed a petition before the Supreme Court on the issue of sexual harassment at the workplace. So on August 13th, 1997, the Apex Court issued guidelines that defined sexual harassment and put the onus on the employers as well as other responsible persons or institutions to provide a safe working environment to women. These guidelines are called Vishaka guidelines. These were to be considered law until appropriate legislation was enacted. So this is like Bhauri in 1997. So she tried to prevent a child marriage. Rajasthan brutally sexually harassed. So today, like we are just going through, not in very deep, just overall, like how constitution or how these things, like how these cases actually work, what exactly happened. We're not going in very deep. What I have understood till now is that understanding how the court works and why the court works is very important. On what basis a particular judge gives a particular judgment, keeping aside his personal alignments, or he's supposed to keep his personal alignments aside, only depending on the facts. Not sure how much like emotions are involved into it. Facts and the constitution. Constitution the basis, facts are presented, and then we see which constitution, which sections or which articles are getting impacted or are in used in particular use case, and then if it is being violated or followed, then it is taken forward. The court held by a majority of 3 to 2 that triple talaq is manifestly arbitrary, in the sense that the martial tie can be broken capriciously and whimsically by a Muslim man without any attempt at the reconciliation so as to save it. This form of talaq must therefore be held to be violative of the fundamental right contained under Article 14 of the Constitution of India. So these things are also getting impacted. Who is in who, which government, and which ideology is in the power? Rather than the government, what is the ideology of that particular government, and are they like they have to make the current kind of public first in the favor of the law or judgment, then only they can pass the judgment. The court held by a majority of 3 to 2 that triple strike is manifestly so that though so many factors including inner judgment, like the current environment is very much important, which is short term, medium term, long term impacts of particular thing. So all of them has to be taken care. And whimsically, so this particular Shaira Bano versus Union of India and ORS versus Union of India, 22nd August 2017, by a bench of 5 judges, the court held by a majority of 3 to 2 that is manifestly arbitrary, in the sense that the martial tie can be broken capriciously and whimsically by a Muslim man without any attempt at reconciliation so as to save it. Where there we also have to understand that many things are written in English and court also functions in English. So inherently some English philosophy is being used. English philosophy, by English philosophy I mean British philosophy. Inherently, this form of talaq must therefore be held to be violative of fundamental right contained under Article 14 of the Constitution of India. Next is Indian Young Lawyers Association versus the State of Kerala on 28th September 2018. Gender justice. Guys, just give me a second. Let me just. I'll just take a moment to respond. Indian Young Lawyers Association versus the State of Kerala on 28th September 2018. In Sabrimala Temple, a Hindu pilgrimage center in Kerala, female devotees between the age group of 10 to 50 years were denied entry on the basis of certain customs and usage. A constitution bench of the apex court led by CGI Deepak Mishra overruled that overruled the Kerala High Court 27-year-old decision that had upheld the restriction on entry of women into the temple. Not sure, guys, why I'm particularly not interested into reading this particular case, but I'll just go through it because it is in the case study and I have to do it. So this is Sabrimala Temple case, like Indian Young Lawyers Association versus the state of Kerala on 28th September 2018. So all of most of these are like under BJP government. I have to notice. In Sabrimala Temple, a Hindu pilgrimage center of Kerala, and they're very much focusing on the girl, ladies, female kind of vote bank. Female devotees between age group of 10 to 50 years but net entry on the basis of certain custom and usage. A constitution bench of the apex court led by CGI Deepak Mishra overruled a constitution bench on the of the apex court led by CGI Deepak Mishra overruled the Kerala High Court's 27-year-old decision that had upheld the restriction on the entry of women in the temple. The court said the dualism that persists in religion by glorifying and venerating women as goddesses on one hand and by imposing rigorous sanctions on the other hand in matters of devotion has to be abandoned. The court said that the dualism that persists in religion by glorifying and venerating women as goddess on one hand and by imposing rigorous sanctions on the other hand in matters of devotion has to be abandoned. Such a dualistic approach and an entrenched mindset results in indignity to women and the degradation of their status. Gender justice 497. I just have to read this particular Indian Young Lawyers Association versus the State of Kerala on 28th September 2018. So, in the Sabrimala temple, this particular case, so in this particular case, a apex court, a constitution bench of the apex court led by Deepak Mishra, ruled that in against the dualism, and mentioned that on one side you have we cannot like glorify we cannot be like glorifying and venerating women as goddesses, and on the other side imposing rigorous sanctions on the other hand in the matters of devotion. This has to be abandoned. It's such a dualistic approach and entrenched mindset results in indignity to the women and degradation of their status. So since all of these are case studies, so basically they are situation, task, action, and result. So ultimately, first you have to understand the situation. Then we have to define what is the task. Then we have to define what are the possible solutions or the way outs. Then decide the deciding factor. Then choose. Then like what has to be action and then result. Choose one of them and then define what has to be done. So ultimately, for any situation, for any case study, be it in any field, law, education, philosophy, psychology, psychotherapy, business, technology, whatever, first you have to understand the case study properly, use case. Then you have to decide the deciding fact. Then you have to focus on the deciding factor. Then you have to decide what is the task here, what is the problem, what is the problem statement. Then you decide the proper alternatives, possible alternatives. Then you have to choose one of them and decide the decide implementation factors. So I'll just end this particular video here. Thank you guys.